Welcome to NTD News. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Here are today's top stories. New York Governor Cuomo says he's had enough of projection models giving virus numbers. He says he won't be making any more predictions for New York. The Supreme Court is looking into a case brought about by a California church. The bishop says they want the court to protect them from discrimination. Flash floods hit Florida over the weekend, and nearby coastal states could be next. And things are getting worse in Brazil as the death toll surpasses the U.S. It's now one of the hardest hit countries globally. The frenetic energy you used to find on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange has been silenced for months now, replaced by electronic-only trading. But some of them will be back at it today.
NYSE will be returning to a number of new safety measures. That includes reminder signs, footprint stickers to keep people apart, and hand sanitizer. Traders won't be allowed to take public transportation, and they'll get their temperature checked at the door. And the rest of the building will be mostly shut down. There will be fewer brokers coming back too, so that typical hustle and bustle won't be there. Instead, you will see folks wearing masks, and they'll be more spread out.
New York's governor says early projection models for coronavirus or CCP virus cases and death rates were all wrong, and he won't be predicting any more. The state's daily death toll has dropped below 100.
Here's my projection model, here's my projection model. They were all wrong. They were all wrong.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says the early projections given by experts didn't turn out to be accurate, and he won't depend on them again.
Now, people can speculate, people can guess. I think next week, I think 2 weeks, I think a month. I'm out of that business because we all failed at that business. Right?
He said there are no guarantees when certain regions will open, as the number of deaths from the virus and hospitalizations cannot be predicted. He mentioned the statewide criteria that the numbers need to fall continually over a 14-day period before areas can reopen, and said Long Island looks set to achieve it this week. The number of daily deaths from the virus in New York recently dropped below 100. The unprecedented lockdown measures have been largely based on modeling by infectious disease experts. The impact of the resulting economic nosedive has led some to question the models. Speaking on an overcast Memorial Day at the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum in New York City, thoughts turned to those who had lost their lives. Cuomo said the families of those who had died would receive the appropriate death benefits, saying it's the least we can do. He said asking those on the front line and essential workers to put themselves at risk by working during the crisis weighed heavily on him and still does. He also said we honor the memory of the fallen by living, growing, and advancing the values and principles of America.
People headed out to New York City's beaches for the Memorial Day holiday, but with restrictions in place, activities were limited.
Police in New York kept a watchful eye over beachgoers who ventured out to relax over Memorial Day weekend. Large groups of people were seen in Coney Island enjoying the good weather. Most people appeared to be wearing masks and adhering to social distancing guidelines. People of all ages came out and the police maintained a presence. Signs reminded people to stay 6 feet apart. Swimming wasn't allowed as there are no lifeguards currently on duty. The Brooklyn Beach and amusement park's famous rides were closed and many of its food stalls were too. But visitors could still access the sand and stroll along the boardwalk. On Jones Beach, police spotted a group of teenagers who they felt weren't following the rules.
We're seniors at a high school and our senior year got canceled, so we decided to come to the beach today because it's Memorial Day. And we were trying to follow the 6 feet apart guidelines. We're outside, blah, blah, blah. But then they came over and started yelling at us.
Paredes says she works and wears gloves and masks at her job. She and her friends were still made to pack up and leave.
I feel like if we're outside at the beach just trying to have a nice day, I feel like we're allowed to do that.
Beaches inside New York City were opened because officials feared people trying to celebrate the holiday would leave the city for suburban shores. But cloudy skies and cooler temperatures largely kept crowds away from Long Island's beaches.
A New York City tradition went virtual this year. The U.S. military hosted the city's annual Fleet Week online to commemorate Memorial Day amid the pandemic.
Fleet Week, a Memorial Day weekend tradition in New York City, took a different approach this year amid the city's lockdown. For the first time, the event was held completely online. Usually, the tradition marks a time when active military ships dock in the city. The week's events often include guided tours of the ships or a military flyover. But this year, they did things a little differently. The Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum instead hosted a virtual Memorial Day ceremony, including wreath-laying and performance of the national anthem. Offering some perspective on the pandemic, Admiral Carl L. Schultz of the U.S. Coast Guard called the small sacrifices we make today a solemn reminder of the ultimate sacrifice many U.S. troops have made to defend the nation. The virtual Fleet Week comes as part of a Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard effort to hold public commemorative events online. So far, they've arranged morning colors aboard Naval Station Norfolk in Virginia, a highlight reel in Memorial Day parades of New York City, and a performance of taps, among others.
Republicans are suing California's governor for a move which they say is illegal and undermines the integrity of elections.
Republicans are suing California Governor Gavin Newsom in federal court for changing the system by which voters come to place their votes. Newsom's unilateral decision gave the order for all registered voters to receive mail-in ballots for the general and presidential elections taking place on November 3rd. All voters will be sent a vote-by-mail ballot whether they want one or not. Voting in person will still be an option. Democrat Newsom signed the order on May 8th. President Trump strongly opposes expanding mail-in voting, which he says is rife with fraud. Other Republicans have warned that Newsom is using the current crisis to score political points by going against the president. The Republican National Committee and others labeled the move an illegal election power grab. They also called it a recipe for disaster that would create more opportunities for fraud. Mail-in voting is particularly susceptible to fraud, much more so than voting in person. Complications arise over errors such as those who have recently deceased getting sent ballots. Some people receive multiple ballots by accident, and thousands of Californians appear to have more than one voter registration. There is also the problem of ballots being lost, sold, or stolen. California law does not allow mail-in voting, but instead allows for an absentee ballot process. Republican stalwart Tom Del Beccaro told NTD sister media The Upload Times that Newsom clearly overstepped his authority as governor. He said the issue must be dealt with in court to avoid lawless behavior such as this becoming common practice.
In the first of its kind, a San Diego church is taking its case to the Supreme Court, even as California's governor issued guidelines on reopening churches yesterday. The bishop on the front line says the case must go ahead to set boundaries for the future.
Bishop Arthur Hodges, spearheading the Supreme Court lawsuit, says churches have been pushed to the back of the line on the state's reopening list.
We are an essential. In fact, we would argue we are one of, if not the most essential, because we are the only ones named in the reopen plan of the state, actually in the Constitution. We are the only ones named that have a constitutional right.
On Friday, President Trump encouraged governors to let churches reopen. And the Department of Justice sent a 3-page letter to California's governor, warning him that keeping churches closed longer than other places may be discriminatory. Afterwards, Governor Gavin Newsom laid out guidelines Monday, saying churches can reopen at 25% capacity. Bishop Hodges says they're still moving forward with the case, so this won't happen again in the future.
What's to keep the governor 3 months from now doing the same thing and putting us right back where we were, almost 3 months ago, 2.5 months ago? So we need a ruling. That's why we need a ruling from the Supreme Court for everybody in the nation.
And he says churches aren't part of the problem, but part of the solution. Telling a story of a church member whose mother died from the virus and has no family left nearby.
And the daughter of the mom who died, member of our congregation, one of the members, she came to me afterwards and said, "Pastor, I need my church family now more than ever."
And he says, seeing how essential their role is, he sought approval from the governor early on. In a hand-delivered letter to the governor, the bishop outlined his plans for reopening safely, but never got a response. The case, now headed to the Supreme Court, is extremely unique, according to the 10 attorneys involved in the case. If the Supreme Court rules in the church's favor, it will mean more protection for churches all over the nation. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The bishop said the bottom line will come on May 31st. He says all the churches he oversees will reopen then, since it's the birth date of the New Testament church. He says he has a strict policy for reopening. They're making members make reservations for attending the service, questioning members about symptoms they may have, and taking temperatures at the door. And now to Florida, where footage from the state looks like hurricane season came a little early this year, but it's just getting hit by a lot of rain. The system is moving northward and could cause flash flooding in nearby coastal states in the next couple days.
Torrential rain flooded South Florida over the Memorial Day weekend. The National Weather Service issued a flash flood watch. It says up to 3 inches fell in the area within 1 hour on Monday afternoon. Footage shows some cars driving on the sidewalk because the roads are so flooded. In Miami, drivers make waves as they push through high water that reaches past the bumper. Parked cars have to get towed, and water started seeping into stores in some areas. One observer says he hasn't seen this much water since Hurricane Irma in 2017. The low-pressure system has a 20% chance of becoming a cyclone by Wednesday. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says it probably won't become a tropical cyclone because of strong upper-level winds. The NHC says the system might spread northward. Heavy rainfall could cause flash flooding in northeastern Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas on Tuesday and Wednesday. The floods arrived just before the start of the Atlantic hurricane season, which runs from June 1st through November 30th. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is forecasting 3 to 6 major hurricanes this year with 70% confidence. An average hurricane season produces 3 major hurricanes.
Did you know there were height restrictions to become a pilot in the Air Force? No shorter than 5'4" or taller than 6'5" until now.
The Air Force is scrapping those height requirements, and removing that minimum requirement is an especially big win for women, considering the average height for women in their 20s is just under 5'4". Before now, anyone who didn't meet the height requirement had to submit a waiver. The Air Force says most height waivers were approved, so instead of looking at height as a standard, the Air Force says they'll focus more on scientific methods, which could include everything from weight to the length of someone's arms and legs.
On Monday, the White House moved up a travel ban on foreigners who have been to Brazil over the past 2 weeks, just as Brazil's daily death toll from the CCP virus surpassed that of the U.S.
Brazil's daily death toll from coronavirus surpassed that of the United States on Monday. That news came as the White House moved a travel ban on some arrivals from the country up by 2 days. Over the weekend, Brazil reached another grim milestone, having the second most coronavirus cases in the world after the U.S. A White House statement moved the start of the ban to midnight on Tuesday, up from Thursday. The ban applies to foreigners traveling to the U.S. who have been in Brazil over the past 2 weeks. The White House did not give a reason for bringing the travel restrictions forward.
Up next, Hong Kongers prepare for more protests over Beijing's proposed new law. Many fear that Beijing is overruling Hong Kong's rights and freedoms. That and more after the break.
How do we get to this point? Back in December, the coronavirus was already spreading in Wuhan, and the Chinese Communist Party was covering it up and punishing the whistleblowers who dared to report the truth. Their actions led to this pandemic, which now has us, in America, stuck in our homes and losing our jobs. To this very day, the Communist Party is still lying, making it more critical than ever for us to get honest reporting about China. The Epoch Times is able to bring you the uncensored truth because we maintain a network of underground sources inside of China, hidden from the censors of the communist government. For instance, our investigative team has been contacting individual funeral homes, hospitals, and they've obtained leaked internal documents which show that China's official numbers are massively underreported by a factor of at least 10. If you're looking for an honest source of news that can keep you informed and safe, check out The Epoch Times. Go to readepoch.com and try your first month for just $1 and get real journalism delivered straight to your doorstep.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
Hong Kong's chief executive, Carrie Lam, is trying to reassure people China's newly proposed law will not hurt Hong Kong's rights and freedoms, a day ahead of the second in an expected series of pro-democracy protests.
After Sunday's protests, Hong Kong is bracing for midweek action over Beijing's proposed national security law. Carrie Lam tried to reassure people in her first comments since the weekend's unrest, saying the new legislation will not affect the city's rights and freedoms. The proposed national security law would allow Chinese security services to operate in Hong Kong for the first time. Many in the city fear that China's armed forces could be deployed onto the streets. In mainland China, sweeping national security laws have been used to target human rights activists, lawyers, journalists, and pro-democracy campaigners. Beijing's move is being met with outrage within the city and from the international community. This week, Hong Kong pro-democracy newspaper, Apple Daily, ran a full-page insert calling on President Trump to act on the city's behalf.
With a dictatorship, freedom is not free. And this is a price we have to be ready for.
The paper's publisher, Jimmy Lai, says Trump is Hong Kong's last hope.
Mr. President, you're the only one who can save us. If you save us and stop China's aggression, you also save the world.
Hong Kong legislators are expected to meet on Wednesday to discuss a proposed national anthem law. While it's not related to the security bill, it's another way Beijing is trying to take control of Hong Kong. Further protests are also planned.
The new law could be implemented within months, but what's China really trying to achieve and why now? We spoke with a China analyst about how the effects of this law will be felt far beyond Hong Kong's borders.
Hong Kongers worry the arbitrary detention common in mainland China will soon become the new norm in Hong Kong.
Our biggest fear right now is Chinese government, or in fact, the Hong Kong government will use this new law in the name of national security to crack down on the opposition or any members in the society who they do not like.
Protests have resumed on the streets of Hong Kong. The U.S. has signaled it would sanction Chinese officials who help enforce the new law. Why is Beijing pushing the law at great risk of international backlash when it's already facing enormous international pressure for its handling of the virus? Qin Peng, a China affairs analyst and former corporate consultant in China, says it's because the communist regime's survival is on the line.
China's communist regime is facing enormous pressure both from the inside and the outside. The international community is trying to hold China accountable for the virus. On the inside, Chinese people are also demanding accountability, and the voices demanding freedom are rising. Its economy is going down, large numbers of companies could go bankrupt, and unemployment is going to rise. In this regard, there is a good chance of a civil uprising occurring in China.
He said in times like this, the most important thing for the CCP is to suppress any dissident voices, lest those voices inspire people to demand more freedom in mainland China, and that Hong Kong has become the elephant in the room. The Chinese regime has always seen Hong Kong as a base camp for pro-democracy anti-communist activities. Every year, Hong Kong holds the world's biggest gathering commemorating the Tiananmen Square massacre of 1989, the Chinese Communist Party's bloody crackdown on pro-democracy students. Religious minorities like Falun Gong that are persecuted in China continue to be active in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is also vocal in advocating for China's prisoners of conscience and human rights lawyers.
Right across the river from mainland China, there is a place that's in some ways independent and free and cannot be completely controlled by the regime. This is just a thorn in the side for the CCP. Because in the eyes of the CCP, national security means the security of the CCP, of the Chinese Communist Party. It's not the security of the Chinese people or the security of China as a country.
China's communist leader recently stressed that China needs to ensure stability in 6 areas, including basic living needs and food and energy security. Qin said the economic and trade slide in China has made Hong Kong less important for the CCP as a trade hub, but more a threat that triggers bigger change in China.
The CCP is basically giving up Hong Kong. It is allowing Hong Kong to be crushed, and then it can turn around and say to the people of Hong Kong, look, this is all because of your protests. It is all because of the U.S. sanctions that Hong Kong suffers. It can use this as propaganda.
Qin said the international community has not yet held China accountable in any significant way, even after years of Hong Kong's freedom being eroded by the CCP. But the stakes might be higher for the world this time.
Because in the past, protecting Hong Kong was just about Hong Kong and Americans' interests in Hong Kong. But right now, the meaning of Hong Kong has been raised to another level. People have realized that if the Chinese Communist Party gets its way in Hong Kong, then in the future, its hand will reach the entire world.
Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Coming up, Mexico's president warning the virus could cost the country as many as 1 million jobs. Find out what recovery plans they're bringing in and more when we return.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Mexico's president says the CCP virus could cost as many as 1 million jobs in the country, as many industries considered not essential remain shut.
The economic pinch of the pandemic in Mexico is hitting a wide range of people, from market sellers to mechanics. And President Andrés Manuel López Obrador says the virus could cost as many as 1 million jobs in his country. Mexico's economy was already in recession before the pandemic struck. Investment banks have predicted a retreat as large as 9% this year. On Sunday, the president tried to paint a rosier picture, touting the promise of new jobs in the future, but with few details.
My prediction is that with coronavirus, 1 million jobs will be lost. But I also want to say that we already have a recovery and new job creation plan.
Right now, Mexico's economy may be in free fall. JP Morgan has projected a steep 40% decline in the second quarter. And on Monday, it posted its worst trade deficit on record.
South Korean prosecutors questioned Samsung's heir today over a controversial deal that they say may have helped advance his succession plans.
South Korean prosecutors questioned Samsung heir J.Y. Lee on Tuesday. He was asked about a controversial deal which they say may have helped advance his succession plans. The deal involves alleged accounting fraud as well as a widely criticized merger of 2 Samsung affiliates. The 2015 merger between Samsung C&T and Chaeil Industries, where Lee is a top shareholder, cemented Lee's control over South Korea's top conglomerate. And prosecutors have been investigating suspected accounting fraud at Chaeil-owned Samsung Biologics after the country's financial watchdog complained the firm's value had been inflated by over $3 billion. A spokesman for Samsung Electronics, where Lee serves as vice chairman, declined to comment. The questioning brings fresh legal trouble for Lee. He faces separate succession-related charges of bribery, which involved former South Korean President Park Geun-hye. Lee was released from a year-long detention over the bribery case back in 2018. And earlier this month, Lee made a rare apology about the bribery scandal and pledged he would not hand the company founded by his grandfather over to his children.
Still to come, a Navy battleship lost in World War II. Researchers locating it thousands of feet below sea. Find out the history and more when we return. Researchers have located the sunken USS Nevada near Hawaii. The wreckage was found more than 15,000 feet below the ocean's surface, helping to close the final chapter of a historic battleship.
For those who are not history buffs, that's the Navy battleship that was hit during the attack on Pearl Harbor. The ship sank in shallow water but was repaired and went on to serve out World War II. In 1948, the Navy used the ship as a gunnery practice target, hoping to sink it. But it took an aerial torpedo to take it down. Search Inc., an underwater and terrestrial archaeology firm, and the marine robotics company Ocean Infinity say they recently discovered the wreckage 65 miles southwest of Pearl Harbor, more than 15,000 feet below the surface. Experts say the Nevada is one of the Navy's longest-serving battleships. It's seen as the epitome of American resilience and perseverance.
Today marks 80 years since one of the defining moments of World War II took place on the French beaches of Dunkirk.
The last stand of the most heroic...
Between May 26th and June 4th, 1940, the British Royal Navy, along with thousands of civilian boats, set sail to France. Their heroic mission was to rescue the nearly 500,000 British and French troops stranded at Dunkirk in the face of an advancing German army. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill summoned civilian boats of all shapes and sizes to join the effort, as Royal Air Force planes dropping bombs on the enemy screamed in the skies above them. In all, 338,000 soldiers were rescued thanks to the improvised flotilla and sometimes chaotic mission. This week, Britain will remember the thousands of men left behind on the beaches 80 years ago, and those who died trying to escape. Commemorations, however, are expected to be muted due to the global pandemic, which has claimed thousands of lives in both the United Kingdom and France.
And that's the latest updates for now. Thanks for tuning in. Catch up again at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Tiffany Meyer.